Welcome to Real Wisdom, where we dive into the real stories of remarkable women. Today, we're so thrilled to have Libby Stevenson with us. Libby is a yoga instructor who embarked on her transformative teaching journey in her 50s, empowering women across all stages of life. Libby is here to share her inspiring story and the wisdom she's gained along the way. And if you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So, Libby, you started a new chapter in your life, I think, when many of us are starting to slow down. And that's really inspiring. What led you to take the leap into becoming a certified yoga instructor? And did you think that maybe you would do it a little differently?
Um, the leap was the fact that I was a stay-at-home mother, and I have 4 children, and they were slowly starting to leave home. And so, being a stay-at-home mother, my focus was my children. But now, as they were leaving home, I had less to do and less of a focus. And at that same time, I was doing yoga because there was a lady who started a yoga class around the corner from me. So I was going to her classes, and I noticed the benefits, physical, mental, emotional benefits, and I wanted to learn more. You don't get a lot of that information in a 1-hour yoga class. So I thought, well, in order to learn more, maybe I should do the teacher training. And like I said, at the same time, I was starting to go through empty nest. So I thought, well, this is a good way for me to invest my time. So I did the yoga teacher training over a period of a year. And at the time, I did it to learn more about why I was feeling better, because I could feel the benefits and I wanted to know why I was feeling better. And I had no intention of teaching. It was literally for personal development. And then it took a year. It wasn't fluffy. I thought it would be a lot easier for some reason. I really underestimated it. And I thought, well, I should do something with this. So I took the leap into actually teaching it. And I thought about who I wanted to teach. And so once I had found my audience, which was pregnant women and women who just had a baby, and I thought back to who I wanted to teach to. And I thought, well, when I was pregnant and I had new babies, there was no way for me to do a safe form of exercise. There was no way to meet other new moms. So I thought, that's who I'm going to teach. And I had to do further certifications, but it was almost like the universe said, this is your path. Because after I finished, I did them back to back. And when I finished them, I had a job in a yoga studio teaching pregnancy and postnatal yoga. So it was almost like, this is your calling. And being a mother of 4 children, it made perfect sense for me to teach those women. I could help them and impart my own experience. So the yoga was there almost as a way to gather the women in and allow them to meet each other. And the yoga was almost incidental in the sense that they were so relieved to find other women that they could talk to about what they were feeling physically and emotionally. So the yoga was a way to gather them, and it was lovely. I really enjoyed teaching them. It fulfilled its purpose. It's interesting, isn't it? My children were leaving, and here I was now teaching women whose children were starting to come into their life. Almost like full circle. I hadn't thought about that before.
What was that first class like?
Very scary. When you become a yoga teacher, they tell you when you go through teacher training, you need to start teaching to family and friends, and that's so that you get comfortable. But I felt very embarrassed, quite frankly, to teach to family and friends, so I didn't. And then when I had to go in and teach, I thought, well, the only way for me to get over my nervousness was to make sure I was well prepared. So I had prepared the class and, what I was going to do. And if anyone had any questions about why we were doing something, I was very well prepared. But it is scary. I think all yoga teachers go through that it's quite scary to get up in front of a yoga class and start teaching, which is actually really interesting because people in the class don't know what's coming next or what to do. So you know a lot more than them. But as a yoga teacher, I think because you're in front of this class and people are following along with your movements, it can be a bit intimidating. But the only way to get over it is to teach. It's almost like a catch-22. You have to teach in order to get over your fear of teaching.
It's funny, though, that the people that you're closest with are those that you would feel the most uncomfortable in front of?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I really, it's funny, isn't it? And I think it's because I knew that they knew I was new at it, new at teaching it.
Yes.
And I think in the back of my mind, I thought they're thinking I don't know what I'm doing, and so I avoided that.
Well, there have been many times when I'm trying something new or I'm trying to learn something new. And if my husband is around, I'll be like, could you please go to the other side of the house? I don't want you to witness this.
Yeah, you would think we would be most comfortable with family and
Yes,
friends, and
right?
yet I guess it's because we don't want to disappoint them. Maybe that's I don't know.
Right. Or thinking, oh, doesn't mom know what she's doing by now? I thought she's been taking classes for a year. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'd like to switch gears a little bit for something quick and fun. Are you up to it?
Sure.
Okay. It's called This or That. So I can get to know a little bit more about you.
Okay.
All right. American coffee shop or a British tea room?
Oh, a British tea room.
Road trip or countryside adventure?
Road trip.
American football or soccer?
Neither.
Neither.
I'm not into either of those.
See?
But maybe I'll say the British soccer
Okay.
because it's quicker. It's a quicker game.
That is a good reason to like it a little bit more. 'Cause I can tell you sometimes Sunday football lasts
It goes on all
hours.
day.
Yes, yes. Okay, greasy cheeseburger or Yorkshire pudding?
I like both. Yeah.
Broadway show or a West End musical?
Oh, both. Yeah, yeah. But I think I love musicals more than a Broadway show.
Oh,
Yeah. But I'll watch a musical anywhere.
somebody hands you tickets, you're gonna go.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to read something to you that I was curious about, and I've seen you mention this before. Is it okay if I read something to you?
Sure.
You've said, I am certified as a pregnancy, postnatal, and menopause yoga teacher because of my lived experience of journeying through those stages without support, advice, and knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think so many women feel that way. So many women feel that way. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And maybe what advice you would give to them when they feel that that part is missing?
Well, I think because when I was pregnant 30 years ago, there wasn't anything out there. I mean, there was the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting, but that's about it. And you kind of went to your doctor and they kind of like, pushed you along every month. But there wasn't any real discussion about motherhood. There wasn't any real discussion of when you actually get home with your first baby, what that's like. And boy, it's scary. But no one tells you that. And no one tells you after you've had a baby that you're still going to look pregnant. I didn't know that.
They don't tell you that.
They don't tell you that. And you're still wearing your pregnancy clothes thinking, what happened there? Why didn't anybody tell me that? All these little things. So you go through this, it's a transformative stage of life. You see your body changing at each stage. So in pregnancy, it's getting bigger. Then in postnatal, you're hoping it goes back to the way it was. And then in menopause, it changes again. And there was no one telling you what to expect, how to manage it, things that can help you manage it physically, mentally, and emotionally. So you're going through it and you're thinking you're the only one who's experiencing these things in the sense that when you go through pregnancy and you start getting larger and larger, for some women, that can be quite triggering if they prided themselves on being petite and thin, and now they have no control over this body that's getting larger. Same thing happens in menopause. And you start thinking crazy things in the sense that you don't know what to think. What is normal? What isn't normal? And so I went through those stages without knowing anything. And then when I did my teacher trainings in the different areas, I learned a lot. And then there was a lot more information out there that I could explore and learn on my own. And those are the things that I bring into my classes. So when I was teaching pregnancy yoga, for example, actually, all my classes, I teach the same way. I don't just go in without a mission. So in pregnancy yoga, it was yoga to help them give birth. In postnatal yoga, it's yoga to bring the body back together. In menopause yoga, it's yoga for different symptoms. And not just physical ones, but also the emotional ones. And just talking about what it means to become a mother and what effect does that have on relationships, and what effect does going through the menopause have. The idea that when we go through menopause, we're being pulled in all different directions, and it's quite overwhelming. You don't really know who you are, and you've got aging parents and kids leaving home, and there's a lot physical symptoms you never experienced before. So those are all the things I bring into my classes, topics that I was thinking at the time, and now I bring them out into the open so that the women can either talk about them or feel like they've got some information. And I'm always signposting women to either books or YouTube videos or experts if they have a question, and just knowing little things that you can do that can help you instead of suffering and thinking, oh my God, I'm the only one. So, having more information is really helpful. And what I would say to any woman starting any one of those journeys is to find a class, a yoga class, a movement class, a Pilates class that is geared towards pregnancy or postnatal or menopause, because that's where you're going to meet other women going through that same stage of life. And actually, women learn a lot more from each other. So even though I was there with information, a lot of them were sharing information. And I think that's how women learn the best, from each other. This worked for me, try this. How many times, has your baby cried through the night and you're thinking, what do I do? Then they come to pregnancy or postnatal yoga and they mention that and they say, oh, try this next time. And it's so comforting to know that someone else went through it and got through it.
Right.
I think that's key, that someone went through it just like I am and they got through it. So maybe I can too.
So a yoga class for a 35-year-old woman who's pregnant is going to be different than a 50-year-old woman who's starting to go through menopause. Yeah. But it sounds like maybe there are some similarities in your approach.
Yes. There are lots of, they sound like three separate times in a woman's life, and they are, but they're all transformative. Your body changes at each one, if you think about it. And pregnancy gets larger, and postnatal, you're, reverting back, more or less. And then in menopause, it changes again. They all have the same or similar complaints. Acid reflux is one of them. Feeling hot in pregnancy, right? You're always hot. Menopause, you're always hot. And when you're postnatal and you have that baby attached to your breast, it's hot. Yes. And the one common complaint in all three groups is lack of sleep. It's amazing, lack of sleep. So I always share ways about sleep posture, and especially in pregnancy when you can't sleep on your stomach and you can't sleep on your back. What can you do? Well, actually, there's a lot you can do. And there are certain poses in yoga that you can get into that are very relaxing, that make you fall asleep. And actually, I teach those same poses to fall asleep in my menopause yoga class, because it's a side-lying pose, but, it works too.
That's so interesting, though. So basically, we're not sleeping for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. For all different reasons. Exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever taken a class? Because I know I've had this experience where, because you were talking about finding a class that kind of fits for the stage of your life that you're in, right. And where it brings up emotions, especially in yoga. I feel that there are different poses that really empty out those emotions. Have you ever had that experience, or can you explain that?
I've had on a couple of occasions, and for me, it was, I remember the very first time, it was one of those bizarre things, and I couldn't stop it. It was in a seated forward fold where you're sitting on your yoga mat and your legs are stretched out in front of you, and then from your hips, you just bend forward and you let your head go. And so you're stretching the muscles at the back of the leg, the glutes, the lower back. But in a way, it's stretching your hips. And we tend to hold emotions in our shoulders and in our jaw and in our hips. And I guess that's where I had to release those emotions, and they just let go. Because I couldn't think of a reason why I was crying. It was, 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was a nice yoga class, and I just started crying. So It's interesting. Emotions do get trapped, they say, in our body. And for me, that was quite an emotional release. And it was just one of those things where I couldn't stop it and I didn't know why I was crying and I just had to let it go. Luckily, my face was down, so people couldn't see me. And then by the time we got to move into a different position, it was fine. But I think in yoga, yoga is unlike, well, it's not a form of exercise. It's not exercise. It's an experience, because in yoga, we don't move individual parts of the body. We move the whole body. So in yoga, you don't just move your arms. You don't just move your legs. You're moving the whole body at once. And I think because of that, there's more of a connection with the spinal cord and the brain. And so there's more of a connection with the nervous system, so that you are releasing tension from the body in a way that you don't in physical exercise. When you're doing exercise, there's a lot of short, sharp movements in exercise. And whereas in yoga, we don't have that. There's a lot of slow movement, even stillness. Sometimes you don't even move. You just stay in the pose. But when you're in the pose, your whole body is involved, your arms, your legs. You're connecting mind to breath. You're constantly thinking about where your body is in space and keeping that alignment. And I think because it is an experience and not exercise, emotions have a way of being released. And that's a good thing, yes, and that's a good thing. So I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to yoga, perhaps not even realizing that that's what's happening. Because when you do exercise, you feel great right afterwards. You've got those endorphins going and you just feel great. But a couple of hours later, you're back to normal, right? Whereas in yoga, it has a lasting effect off the mat. Of course, not if you just do it once a month. But if you do it regularly and consistency, that feeling lasts and takes you forward for days. And that's what I experienced when I was doing yoga, and why I wanted to do the teacher training. It was this feeling of, gosh, I feel much lighter and I feel better, mentally, and I feel better emotionally, and I feel more resilient. Why is that? And it's because of this lasting effect of yoga, because it involves the whole body and not just individual parts of the body. So yes, you're getting those endorphins, but there's a lot more happening, and it's lasting. It's really lasting, and it lasts longer than the high you get from exercise. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm saying both are necessary, but I'm trying to explain the difference, because a lot of times people say to me, oh, yoga is just another form of exercise. And it's like, no, it's not. It's different. It's
Oh,
different.
definitely. I do practice yoga, not as regularly as I would like, but I know what you're talking about when you say that there's that mind-body connection, and it can really help change your day.
I find you leave a yoga class and you feel better. You feel calmer and you feel better. But you don't just feel better about yourself. You almost feel better about all the issues that you're dealing with, which is not something that happens when you leave any other exercise class. You feel better about yourself, and that's it. But when you leave a yoga class, it's almost like you feel a lightness. Yes, those problems are still there, but I feel better about them somehow. I feel like I can manage them.
Have you ever had a mentor or somebody in your life that really helped shape your direction? Maybe it was someone through yoga, or could have been a different part of your life.
I would say it was going to sound crazy. It was my husband. I think he's been my biggest supporter and has always been very supportive of any choice I've made. When we were married, I was working in banking. And then when we came to London, we thought we would start a family because I was in my 30s. And I loved having my first child, and I decided I wanted to be a stay-at-home mother, and he was very supportive of that. And then when I started doing yoga and I said, well, I'd like to become a yoga teacher, he's been very supportive. That's been wonderful to have his support there along the way. I would have to say my husband. I know it sounds kind of strange, but yeah, I'm lucky. I'm married to the guy who's the most supportive person in my life.
It's kind of the way it should be. Have you ever gotten him to a yoga class?
if you don't do a yoga class, but he'll say something aches, and I'll say, well, try this. Let's do this together. So it might be a pose, but he won't do yoga. He just won't do it himself because now he's in his late 60s, and I think he's a bit stuck in his ways.
Right.
So,
That's not going to happen now.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
I know that you grew up in the United States and ended up moving to England. I
Yeah.
know that it was quite some time ago, but I'm always just so interested in somebody who's able to do that. I grew up in Chicago and I'm still not far from the home in which I grew up in, maybe 30 miles away.
Mm,
But
mm,
what was that experience
yeah.
like? You weren't just moving a home, you were moving to another country.
It's interesting because my parents are from Sicily in Italy, and they had emigrated to the States. And so they went there without any family. So I didn't grow up with aunts and uncles and cousins. And so when my husband and we were working in New York City, and when he was offered the opportunity to move to London and head up the office here, I was more than okay to do that. It was almost like that didn't bother me because my parents had done it. And initially, when we came, we weren't here to live here forever anyway. It was like one of these, 5-year things. So I thought, oh, that'll be a nice experience. And it's an English speaking country. I think if we had been moved to someplace really culturally different where I didn't know the language, I might not have moved there just because of unfamiliarity.
Right. Way
But
bigger challenge.
yes, exactly. But because it was to an English speaking country, I thought, okay, that sounds like it's doable. And at that same time, we had wanted to start a family. So we thought, let's see if this works. I'll be in a foreign country. I won't know anybody really, but it might be just what I need to start a family and feel relaxed. And then I did start a family here, and the company did send us back when his stint was over. And actually, we loved living in London so much. And at that point, we had 2 children that we thought, let's move back. And we did. And at the time, my family had moved down to Florida anyway. So they weren't so all of these things just happened at the same time. And it was one of those things where my husband and I felt, well, where is the best place for him and I to raise our children? Chose London. We were familiar with it. We had friends here. And the city is a great city for walking.
Mm.
It's a great city with children because there's a lot for them, tons of parks, tons of things for them, theater even for them. And there's a lot for my husband and I as adults. So it was the best of both worlds. We've been very happy in London. All 4 children were born here, raised here, went to schools here. This is home.
Is there something now that you've lived there for such a long time that you couldn't imagine having part of your day? I don't know, maybe it's a food or a place or something
Oh,
that you have fallen in love
it's
with.
just the fact that I live in London. I think I really love the city. It's a beautiful country, the UK. I've just had a very positive experience. I mean, I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything anymore. Initially, when I first came, there were a lot of US foods you couldn't get here unless it was in specialty shops. But now you can get anything. I'm very comfortable where I am.
But
So that's
I
a
know
good
it's
question.
true that if you moved back to New York, the boys would be like, oh, see you later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're young, still making their way. And yeah, I can't be chasing my children. I mean, I have one daughter who lives with me in London, and then 2 boys in New York, and then a daughter who lives in North Carolina. Who do you chase? You know?
Right.
I'll just stay where I am and you guys come to me?
They definitely figure out who was the favorite at that point in time. I would love to ask if there's something that you have going on right now that you're passionate about, that you would love the community to know about Libby. Can
All
you
right.
let us in on
Yeah.
any little secrets or anything that's coming
Okay.
up?
Well, I think what I would say is you're never too old to start something new. When I started doing yoga, I was in my early 50s and I became a yoga teacher in my late 50s. And now at 62, I'm going to be running my first yoga retreat. If you think you're too old to do something, that's just not true. And I think that's what I would like to share with women, because I think as they go through midlife, they start thinking, I need to slow down. I'm coming towards the end. That kind of thinking of, I'm coming to the end of my career and all of these things. My children are leaving home and I'm getting older. And no, now is your time. That's right. The children are leaving home. Maybe you're coming into retirement. Exactly. Do what you want to do now. Now it's your time. Think about your hobbies, and maybe you can pursue one of those, or maybe start a new thing. I mean, I started yoga. That was a new thing. But it's never too late to start something new and even pursue something you're passionate about. Absolutely. If you've been thinking about writing a book, now's the time to do it. I would love women to not think of aging and midlife as coming to a cliff, if that makes sense. Well, you're coming to a cliff, but look at the view. There's so much more out there. So pursue that. I certainly never saw this coming. I kind of knew I needed to find a new focus because my children were leaving home and I had a lot of time on my hands, but I didn't have any hobbies, and I always felt mad at myself for not having hobbies. And so when the yoga fell into my lap, it just snowballed. And look, here we are. I'm talking to you because of it. But, learning new things, like I had to go onto social media and start marketing myself. And there's a lot of learning involved. And how do you put your concepts up into social media? So I had to learn how to use something called Canva. And that constant learning is good. It's good for us. It's good for our brain. So yes, you're never too old to start something new.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time today. This was such a great conversation. I hope
Thank
maybe
you.
we'll be able to do this again, and you could teach us a little bit of yoga to maybe not be so nutty sometimes during the day.
Sure, my pleasure. Yeah, and that's the other thing. If anyone listening to this thinks, I'm too old to do yoga. No. Like I said, I started in my early 50s. I think the key, if you've never done yoga before in your life and you're thinking, well, why should I start now in my 50s or my 60s? Because it'll keep you flexible. It'll improve your coordination, your balance. It's good for your overall health, your mental health. And you need to find the teacher that's right for you. That's the key. And I think once you find that teacher, then she'll help you even adapt the poses to you and your flexibility and mobility. And if you can't get down on a yoga mat, you can still do chair yoga. So there's so many different options available. And if anyone is thinking, okay, how do I start then? There are a couple of options. One is start online. So you're at home in the privacy of your own home. There's a lot on YouTube. Just look for beginner yoga. And there's tons of teachers. Find someone that resonates with you. Or call up your local yoga studio. Tell them you're a complete beginner. You're a little bit older. What can they offer you? And you know what? I'm sure they'll be able to help.
How can our audience find you?
I have a website, www.libbystevensonwellbeing.com. So that's one way. And the other way is I'm pretty active on Instagram at libbystevenson.wellbeing. And I teach on 2 online platforms for women over 40. That's where I teach my yoga. One is called Midlife Makeover, and the other one is called Owning Your Menopause. I'm teaching a yoga retreat in June, but all of that is on my website. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
I know, this was fun. Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinempart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.